The Israel-Iran war is now entering its third day. And the most important development that's happening right now as we speak is Israel establishing full control over Iran's airspace. I originally planned to say that this move opens up several strategic options for Israel. But after the Iranian attack over the past few hours, it is already clear which path Israel has chosen, and it marks the beginning of the end for the Iranian regime. Before I explain that, it is important to point out that Israel is supported by the West. It's receiving backing from the United States and also from major Western European powers, Britain, France, and Germany. Unfortunately, that kind of support can't be taken for granted these days. In recent months, we have seen harsh criticism from Western Europe towards Israel. But now, in this moment of truth, the West is standing with Israel. And it is encouraging to see that when it really matters, the West understands how dangerous it would be for a fanatical Islamist dictatorship that terrorizes its own people to possess nuclear weapons and thousands of missiles. In today's world, even that deserves a thank you. The most significant development in the past 24 hours has been the absolute aerial dominance of the Israeli Air Force over Iranian skies. If you are following the news, you might think the main story is the rockets being fired back and forth. That's what the headlines in Israel are focusing on. And yes, of course, that's important, and I will explain why in a moment. But to really grasp the full picture, you need to understand the central event here is Israel's control over Iran's airspace. Since the mid-1960s, Israel's military strategy has always been to first gain control over the skies. Only then can ground forces operate safely under air cover. It's no secret that the strongest part of the Israeli military is the Air Force. To give you an idea of just how good it is, I will tell you something personal. When I enlisted, I wanted to be a pilot. Planes were my first love, before I discovered how fun girls are. But the Israeli Air Force looked at me, laughed in my face, and said, "You are average. We take only the best." And that's how I ended up in tanks. Anyway, the first real test of this air power strategy came in the Six-Day War in 1967. In just 3 hours, Israel wiped out the air forces of Egypt and Syria, paving the way for a decisive victory. 6 years later, in the Yom Kippur War, Egypt had equipped itself with anti-aircraft missiles, which caused significant damage to the Israeli Air Force. Of course, there have been countless other military events between 1973 and today, but the core approach hasn't changed. Eliminate the threats to our aircraft and then use aerial superiority to dominate the battlefield. And that's exactly what happened in Iran. First, Israel took out the Iranian air defense systems. Then the Israeli Air Force moved on to strike the two main targets the government has defined: Iran's nuclear program and its ballistic missile capability. That mission isn't complete yet. Iran is a massive country, so it will take a few more days before Israel can hit the majority of those targets. This video was originally meant to discuss the moment Israel achieved air superiority and the strategic options that would open. But in the Middle East, things move fast. And now, it is absolutely clear which direction Israel is heading: the destruction of the Islamist regime in Iran. I hope Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, enjoyed his breakfast, because there is a good chance he won't make it to dinner. To understand why this course of action is so clear for Israel, you have to understand what happened in the last few hours. Iran launched hundreds of missiles at civilian population centers. Early reports suggest dozens of Israelis were killed, including children. That's a red line for Israel. Until now, as I said, Israel has only targeted military sites in Iran. Not a single missile was launched with the intent to hit civilians. Iran had a choice: They could have targeted Israeli military bases or nuclear sites, but instead they chose to fire on civilians. If you look at international media coverage, this distinction doesn't exist. And I really don't want to be that guy who says, everyone's lying to you and only I'm telling the truth. But everyone's lying to you and only I'm telling the truth. Well, maybe not lying, let's say distorting and manipulating. Look at CNN. Iran and Israel trade strikes as conflict rages. And the BBC. Iran launches new wave of missiles at Israel as Israeli Air Force strikes targets in Tehran. These headlines are exactly why people don't understand what's going on. From those titles, it sounds like a simple back and forth. Israel shoots, Iran shoots back, that's it. But for Israel, there is a massive difference between hitting military targets and targeting civilians. And that difference is what will determine Israel's next step. And of course, the most dishonest headline comes from my friends at We Love Terror, also known as Al Jazeera. Shock, fear in Tehran after Israel bombs residential military areas. Hold on a second. Didn't I just say Israel isn't targeting civilians? But Al Jazeera is claiming the opposite, that Israel is bombing residential neighborhoods. So who is telling the truth? Let's look at their own article. Even in the photo, you can clearly see that Israel didn't just flatten a building. There is a precise targeted strike. But who was the target? At the end of the Al Jazeera article, it says, at least 6 nuclear scientists, including a former head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, were assassinated in the attack. Several of the country's top military commanders were killed as well. Notice how the headline screams residential area, but at the bottom they admit the real targets were nuclear scientists and top military officials. International media, which had no problem showing you graphic images of injured Palestinians in Gaza, simply don't know how to report that Israel is hitting military targets while Iran is firing at civilians. And if you don't understand that, you can't understand what's going to happen next. Because Iran has crossed Israel's red line, Israel will now strike the Iranian regime with full force. Israel is not going to randomly bomb civilians. That's not what we do. But government buildings, infrastructure, and regime officials, they are all going to be targeted. Right now, the most critical objective for Israel is to eliminate Iran's ability to launch ballistic missiles. Israeli estimates suggest they still have around 2,000 missiles left. Once that threat is neutralized, the people of Tehran, Isfahan, and Mashhad are going to see Israeli Air Force jets overhead. Jets with Star of David at the wing, destroying regime targets. There is no free internet in Iran, so the government can still lie to its citizens. But soon, the Iranian people will look up and see the truth in the sky. The regime that oppressed them for over 40 years is about to fall, thanks to the beautiful Israeli F-15s, F-16s, and F-35s. Please share this video, give it a like, and subscribe. I want to thank all my supporters. You keep me going. And to the 10% of you watching from Israel, stay safe. Yalla bye.